Hello everybody, my name is Sasha Ritchie and I am one of the case managers here at Foster Kinship. Today we are going to be talking about guardianship. So guardianship has 3 different steps to it. For this video we are going to be going over step 1. So when we talk about guardianship, we want to first think about what is a guardian and what are the responsibilities and what's your role as the guardian to the child. So for a guardian, for a legal guardian, this is different from temporary guardianship. For the typical NRS 159 legal guardianship in the state of Nevada, it is when you are responsible for the child's well-being, ensuring that their housing, clothing, and educational needs are met, as well as their healthcare needs. If you're wondering about healthcare, the child may be able to qualify for Medicaid HMO plan that we can help assess and apply for after you are appointed guardian. As for the biological parents, when someone is the legal guardian of the child, the natural parents' rights are not terminated. They're considered somewhat suspended. So they are still the natural parents, they're still have some rights over the child, but decisions are made by the guardian, by you, once you're appointed guardian. So thinking about if guardianship is right for your family is the first step into kind of starting the process. So if you're wondering, like, of course I'm going to be the guardian, my kids need me, and that's completely fine. But there are some additional things that we should be considering. So when we think about guardianship, typically we have to think about if the child is going to be able to safely reunify back to their natural parent. Now, typically, if there is a open CPS case, meaning that the case is considered formal, CPS is the one, along with the judge, deciding when it is appropriate for the child to reunify. When it comes to guardianship, there is no real formal process or checks and balances in ensuring when the kiddos will go back home. So that's something to think about, because as a guardian, you are then considered the full-time caregiver of this child. So if you have situations where you have like a really busy life or hectic work life, managing other kids, thinking about your finances, thinking about your age. There's just so many factors that we have to now begin to think about when it comes to, is it appropriate for me to become this child? Let's say you have reflected and yes, right now you can go ahead and start the legal guardianship process by taking a look and researching, can my child qualify for Medicaid? Does this child qualify for any sort of financial assistance that can help me care for this child? Let's talk about finances for just a second. For financial, you are considered, as a legal guardian, you will have to financially provide for the child as a legal guardian. So if there's changes in your finances or any worry, we can assess to see if your household would qualify for child-only TANF. Child-only TANF is through the Division of Welfare, and it is cash assistance that you can potentially qualify for the child. It is based off of your household income. So there's a certain criteria you have to meet, and you would contact us and we would assess for that. So let's say you do qualify, how much can you get to make sure that you can adequately meet the child's needs? We know that children are expensive. When they're going into teenagehood, when they're toddlers, it doesn't matter. They're always hitting a growth spurt. There's clothes to take into account. There's food to take into account. It's a lot to kind of think about, and we tend to brush it off as it will be fine, and then we make the decision to become a legal guardian, and it heavily impacts our finances. So when we think about what is child-only TANF and is it going to be enough, that's something we have to consider. Child-only TANF is about $418 a month for one child, with $60 for any additional child. So it's not much, right? Since especially if you are taking care of or thinking about becoming guardian for 3 or more kids. Kids are, again, very expensive. So that's something to think about. Next thing is, what about childcare? Let's say you are a working individual. What about my childcare needs? So Urban Lake is a likely option for you, but under the normal NRS 159 guardianship, the Urban Lake child care subsidy is only covered for 1 year. So you can only have some help with child care payments for 1 year. Now, that's not a long time, right? Because then you have to think about, well, what am I going to do after that year is up and I can no longer get any sort of help with childcare? So that's another thing you have to think about, because childcare is very expensive as well. So those are some challenges that we often run into when it comes to legal guardianship. And I would say the other one is that a lot of people do not think about is having a co-guardian. So as a legal guardian, you are able to identify another individual who can be a co-guardian with you, which we always recommend. A co-guardian can be in the home with you, so it can be your spouse or your partner. It can also be a family member outside of the home that you trust, that in case anything were to, knock on wood, ever happen to you, hopefully it doesn't, right? But in that situation, who else can care for this child if mom and dad cannot? So that's another thing we need to think about. If not you, who else? So have a conversation with another family member, and it's better to already have that individual on the co-guardianship with the paperwork during the first time, because the process of terminating guardianship and transferring guardianship over to another individual can be a lot of work as well. So I'd say if you have someone in mind that you trust with the kids, have them already be a co-guardian with you. So now let's talk about, you have thought about your finances, your health, your lifestyle, reunification, back with parents and kiddos coming back together. You decide, yes, guardianship is definitely an option for me. I want to go ahead and get started on this process. What do I need to do? So we help our caregivers with this. I'm going to share my screen with you. Here is the Family Law Self-Help Center. Here's the website right up here. We can go under guardianship. And I love the way that Family Law has outlined everything, because they really do make it very clear for you on exactly what you need to do to complete guardianships. This is the one we want, court-ordered child guardianship. So what this means is that you will complete the necessary steps and file the paperwork, and the judge will review the guardianship and there will be a hearing. So the first step is completing your paperwork and knowing what you're going to need. So this is the process. We have to have a family cover sheet, confidential information sheet, the petition, citation. So those are 4 documents. You will need your photo ID as well. And then if you have it, the child's birth certificate. Now, sometimes we do not always have the child's birth certificate, and that's understandable. So with that, we can get a little bit creative about obtaining child's birth certificate either before your appointed guardian or after. There's numerous ways to do that, and that could be a whole nother video, so I'm not going to get into it. But you are still able to file your paperwork to become a guardian, even if you don't have the child's birth certificate. As long as you have your ID, we can troubleshoot your birth certificate later. So this is the first step. Now I'm going to click one of the hardest documents for people to complete, and I'm going to do the 2 to 3 children, but of course you pick whichever one applies to you. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because I help my families with this paperwork. But however, I am going to explain what my role is in this helping process and what your role is. So one of the most important parts of a guardianship is identifying the appropriate family members that have to be served. This is part of part 2. I'm going to talk about it here in part 1 because it comes up when we're doing our initial paperwork. So here you can see that it's asking about the parents. So let's say that mom and dad are homeless and we don't have their address. What we're going to do is a simple search on Google. We have a people search finder website. I can't word that any better, where we just find out using mom and dad's first name, last name, what city they were in last, and then we locate their last known address by kind of like making sure that we have the right age group, things like that. So as long as we can have the parents' last known address, then we can serve them. There are some rules to that. There are some exceptions to those rules, and I'll talk about that. Grandparents. Let's say that you are an aunt and uncle trying to obtain guardianship of a minor. We do have to identify grandparents, as grandparents do have rights, and they can certainly object or even agree to the guardianship. So we have to put down both the maternal side, which is mom's side, and the paternal side, which is the father's side. Let's say we do not know their addresses either. Dad is completely unknown. We do a due diligence. So maybe we have dad's first name or last name or both. I can do a simple search by doing some investigative work and finding out how I can link this individual to their parent. So I do that. But as long as we do try and find these individuals, that's what the court is really looking for. Now, your responsibility in this is making sure that you can help me to identify who these people are. Because by law, we do have to serve parents and grandparents, as well as, if you take a look in this bottom area, brothers and sisters over the age of 14 and older. So again, we're doing a due diligence search here. Again, your responsibility is to provide these names to me, and I will hunt them down as best we can. Another thing is, let's say that you are taking guardianship of a minor who is over the age of 14. If your kiddo is 14 and older, they will have to consent to the guardianship, which is pretty easy. It's a separate document that you will complete, and then the kiddo will just sign it. And I will help with that as well, as long as you can just make sure that your responsibility is to inform the child that this is them consenting to this guardianship. A lot of times, we also do not consider what children want in guardianship either. So I would say maybe having a talk with your kiddo, making sure they understand what guardianship is, making sure they understand that their parents can still be a part of their life, that their parents are still their parents, and what it means when you are a guardian for them. You can explain it in very simple terms. The way I like to explain it is guardianship allows me to take you to the doctor's office. Now I don't have to have mom take you all the time. Guardianship means I can enroll you in school now. So simple things like that, which helps the kiddos understand, like, okay, like this is like a legal formality, right? In simple kid terms. Now, when it comes to kiddos and their birth parents, sometimes kids may have a question such as, well, can my mom and dad just come and get me anytime? No, You can let them know that if you want to have a relationship with your parents, you definitely can. But one thing to note is that you, as the legal guardian of the child, can make those decisions with the child, or if it's not always great, you may make the decision to not have the child's natural parents a part of their life. It's really up to you how you kind of include the natural parents into the situation. Um, Based off of safety. And again, as the legal guardian, that is your responsibility because the safety of the child is your biggest responsibility at that point. Let's say that, just going to touch on this one more time because I thought of a different question that sometimes caregivers ask is about visitation. So parents can certainly do visits with their kids, but again, it's going to be up to your discretion, as well as if you would like to include your child, which I highly recommend, including them into that conversation to see what they want as well. So taking all of that into account and factoring that in. So that is a little bit about part one. This is the hardest to understand document. So again, this is something I help with in understanding what your role is in completing these documentations. So I, again, will complete these documents with you. It is your responsibility to make sure that you go to court when there's a court hearing. It is your responsibility to ensure that that when there's any changes to court, that you are effectively communicating with the court system and finding out any changes or any additional documents that is requested. So at times, not everything is black and white, even with guardianship. We can provide all the information possible and the judge will still want something else. If that is so, it is your responsibility to obtain and do whatever is necessary to make sure that the guardianship is granted. This kind of takes us into step 2 of how to serve the biological parent. So I am going to do a different video on serving the biological parents and what it means if they actually consent to guardianship. At times, parents will agree to guardianship. So we'll talk about that in a different video. If you guys have questions about part 1, again, you can collaborate a lot with me on part 1. The biggest thing is understanding, is guardianship right for you and your kiddo, and the biological parents, and then assessing for all of those different factors go into being somewhat of a permanent caregiver. Thank you guys.